This video will take a look at the symbols which are used to notate rhythm. In other words, notes and rests. Here are the most common notes and rests which are used to write music. There are others. There are notes which are longer than whole notes and notes which are shorter than 16th notes, but these are predominantly the ones that we are going to be using this semester. A whole note takes up exactly the same amount of time as a whole rest, and so forth. When we are looking at the time value of a note, they are related to each other in very predictable proportions. But without more information, in other words, a time signature, no one note has any absolute value unto itself. So in other words, a quarter note does not necessarily equal one beat, although it very commonly does. Any of these note values can be assigned the note value which is equal to one beat, and we'll look at that more next week. What we can tell is that a whole note is equal to 2 half notes, and a half note is equal to 2 quarter notes, and so forth. A quarter note equal to 2 eighth notes, and an eighth note is equal to 2 16th notes. With these note values, you can add them up to note equivalents. It's a little bit like math. A whole note can be equal to a variety of different combinations of notes. So one whole note is equal to 2 half notes, or 4 quarter notes, or 8 eighth notes. But it can also be equal to a variety, an almost infinite variety of different note values and rest values. So a whole note can be equal to a quarter note, 2 eighth notes, 4 16th notes, and another quarter note, or it can be equal to a quarter note and a quarter rest, 2 eighth notes, and another quarter note, etc. So all of these groupings between these measure lines are equal to one whole note. There are a couple of other symbols that are going to be necessary to understand to be able to work with rhythms as well. The first is a tie, this curved line that is connecting two notes. It's called a tie. It is essentially a musical plus sign. So there are certain situations when there is not a note which can add up to a specific length that you need, so you can tie two notes together. So in this case we have a whole note plus a half note plus a half note plus a half note, etc. The second symbol that is going to be necessary is the small dot which is placed after the note. It's very important to place that dot accurately. You don't want to just put the dot willy-nilly wherever you go, because if this dot is on top of the note, say if it were up here, that would have a different meaning altogether. That would be a staccato, which is a stylistic mark which tells you to put separation between the notes, but it is not a rhythmic indication. A dot following a note increases the value of a note by half the value of the note, the original note itself. So a dotted whole note is equal to a whole note tied to half its value, the half note. A dotted half note is equal to a half note plus half its value, a quarter note. Dotted quarter note is equal to a quarter note plus an eighth note, etc.